What's up, everybody? It's Pichael with League of Items, and today we're going to discuss my 4 favorite teams for the upcoming season. The 2022 Spring Split is where we're going to start off. But in reality, I'm going to like these teams for the spring, the summer, potential outside chances at winning the World Championship. And again, like I always say, the primary reason I make videos is for people who are betting on League of Legends and want to make money on League of Legends. Some of these takes will not be in line with what you think about the team, but that's why it's my video and not your video. If you want to explain to me why you think I'm wrong, go ahead, make a comment. That's totally fine with me. But as time goes on, these are the 4 teams that I reserve the absolute right to be completely unreasonable and to continuously pick them and support them and have unrealistic expectations, because first and foremost, I'm a better. Second and not foremost, I'm a fan. And I love League of Legends, and you know, you got to have the squads that you love. So the first squad that we're going to talk about is from the LCS, and I have one team from the 4 major regions. Some people will say, Pichael, LCS isn't a major region. And I'll say to that, maybe you're right. But I don't really care about that. I'm just thinking about what teams do I want to support at an unreasonable level this year. And I try to think about what kind of impact can my picks have on the betting community, because ultimately I want to inspire everyone to make a lot of money. And I'm not talking about a little bit of money. I'm talking about volcanic amounts of money. Ridiculously large amounts of money. And if you bet on this team to win the LCS lock-in, or if you did bet on them before all the news started coming out, and you know, their odds are a little bit lower now, but if you had any sense about you after watching my previous video and hearing about how high I was on them, I think you have to start off with the Evil Geniuses. And the Evil Geniuses have some very promising young talent. I think people will be somewhat surprised to learn the ages of some of these players. So let me get that up on my screen right now. So starting off in the top lane, obviously Impact is not a very young player anymore at 26-year-old, but Impact is by far the oldest player on the team. Still younger than me, but he's the oldest player on the team at 26 years old. I think he's still a legit top laner, and other teams will give him a lot of respect during the pick ban phase. And you can somewhat rely on him to be consistent. Obviously, everybody has bad games, bad matches, but overall, you can rely on someone like Impact to make a large impact throughout the season. In the jungle, we have one of the players that I'm the most excited to watch in the LCS this year, Inspired. And Inspired's been playing in the LEC for a couple of years. Everyone knows that. Everybody knows Inspired's face. Everybody is used to watching him play at a very high level. Coming over from Rogue, he really helped put Rogue on the map in terms of being a serious contender in LEC. And he's only 19 years old. So we've watched him, I think, since 2020, maybe the end of 2019. But since that point, Inspired's been one of the top Western junglers. I think it's not really debatable at this point. I know that there are some LCS fans who aren't as familiar with Inspired because they don't watch as much LEC, but he's going to come in, and I think he's instantly a top 2 or 3 jungler. He's probably the best jungler in the region. I think he's the best jungler in the region. Then in the mid lane, we have Jojo Pyun. Jojo Pyun, 17 years old. That's exciting. When you get a player into your starting roster when he's 17, you give him an extended runway for his professional career, because he's able to make mistakes, and people will understand that those are somewhat likely, and hopefully the community reaction isn't so insane that it discourages Jojo Pyun. But being surrounded by impact-inspired Danny and Vulcan, I think it just makes it much less likely that we have a complete failure. And worst case scenario, Jojo Pyun's not a professional League of Legends player for one reason or another, and Evil Geniuses will be able to bring in someone like Jensen potentially and make it all work out. So in my mind, although mid lane is an extremely important position, maybe the first or second most position in League of Legends, I think jungler's probably the most, but then it's mid lane. Could he tank their entire season? Potentially, but that's not what this video is about. I like that people are tempering their expectations for Evil Geniuses because they have someone like Jojo Pyun on their team. But I'm willing to take that risk, and I will put my money where my mouth is. Next up in the bot lane, we have Danny and Ignar. Danny is 17 and Vulcan is 22. So Danny, at 17 years old, in my mind, is already the best AD carry in the LCS. And some people will say, Pichael, that's insane. You're a crazy person. And I don't disagree with you. However, there aren't many AD carries that I have a ton of respect for. I don't have a ton of respect for their playmaking ability, and that is probably the thing that I look for the most out of AD carries, because anybody can go out there and play a utility AD carry and just get through the laning phase, don't really trade with the other team, you get to a dragon fight, maybe you get 1 or 2 kills, and then you have a bunch of superficial stats, and then people say, oh, you're a good player. We have a lot of those players in the LCS, the LEC, and I don't really agree with a lot of people's talent evaluation of AD carries, because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Danny type players who are willing to take that gigantic risk, make an amazing play. Players like Danny, Jackie Love, Tactical has had some of those types of plays. And I'm not saying those are the 3 best AD carries in the world, but that's the style that I like, because people will have a wide range of opinions on those types of players, because you'll see an amazing game and then you'll see a horrible game, and that's exciting. In reality, I think that Viper and Ruler are probably the 2 best AD carries, and I think Huanfeng's up there as well, but it depends on what style you prefer, and it depends on a bunch of different factors, like how good is the team, because if you're on a good team, you're going to look better. But I think that Danny and Vulcan are probably the best bot lane in North America. That's enough for Evil Geniuses. I love them. They are my favorite team in the LCS, and it's really not even close. I love them for betting reasons, but I also just love the players that they have, and I think that they're going to have a great season. Next up is Vitality. So when I started thinking about who I wanted to include in this video, I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, most of the teams that I like are considered somewhat strong, but they're not really a top 2 or 3 contender in their region. And then I got to the LEC, and I'm like, well, there's only one team I like in the LEC, and they have almost all the good players, and that's Vitality. Alfari is arguably the best top laner in the league. Selfmade's arguably the best jungler in the league. Perks is definitely one of the best mid laners in the league. I know some people say, oh, he was bad on Cloud9 all year, but then he went to Worlds and he did well enough. Then we have Carzzy and Labrov. I like Carzzy. I think that Carzzy was overrated by the end of last year. Mad Lions in general were overrated last year, and I understand people in the comments section are going to be super mad at me because I'm talking trash about Mad Lions, but I'm not really talking trash. I'm just saying they're overrated. I don't think that they're bad. They're just overrated. It's literally what the word means. So just relax. But Carzzy and Labrov, I think that Labrov was an okay player. When it was Comp and Labrov, I thought that they showed some promise, but they weren't really the gigantic difference makers that their team needed. And then at one point, Crownshot came in for Comp. I've completely blanked on Crownshot's name in 3 different videos so far this year. So obviously I have a very high opinion of him. But I think that Vitality, this is a very interesting super team level team, and I do genuinely believe that they are a super team. Fnatic is the only roster that I would even consider Fnatic is the only team right now that I would consider in a matchup against them, and that's basically a lie, because there's no way that I would pick Fnatic against Vitality right now unless the line was completely out of whack. Right now, Vitality to win the split is a plus 275, I think. So it's not really great value for your money. Actually, it might actually be good value for your money because the implied win rate for that is only 27%. In reality, I think that Vitality wins a split more often than that. So I just completely talked myself in circles, and I think that Vitality is actually still a good bet at plus 275. You have to take into consideration that your money's going to be laid out there for a couple of months. I don't know when the LEC season ends, but you're going to have different opportunities to hedge out of it, and I don't see the number getting much better than this. Like, even if they lost a few games, I don't think the sports book is going to put them at plus 400, plus 500, or I could maybe plus 400, but plus 500 probably not. So if you're looking for a season-long bet with what I would consider is going to be probably a high success rate, I think that you could definitely take a look at Vitality plus 275. And again, it's because all of their players are in the upper echelon of talent in the LEC, except for maybe Labrov. But watch, Labrov, people are going to start talking about Labrov and say, oh my God, this guy's insane. Look how good he is. When it's because the rest of the players on his team are creating gigantic advantages. So just be prepared for that, because at some point Labrov will be given too much credit and too much of the blame if they're losing, because he's the least highly thought of player. Is that a phrase you can say? So that's it in the LEC. Next up, we're going to the LCK, and we're talking about DRX. People who've been watching my videos so far this year are probably sick of hearing about DRX, but I'm very hopeful that they're going to have a ridiculously good season, and I would consider betting on them at plus 4,000. So that means that if you bet $100, you get 4,000 back, or 4,100 back, and the updated odds actually have them at 4,500. So the odds are moving in the opposite direction. The only concern that I would have for this team is the AD carry spot, because if Deft isn't at the same level that he used to be, which I'm not saying that he is or isn't, then they're going to bring in Taeyun. Taeyun last year had some good performances. DRX struggled overall after an okay spring split. I think they had a really bad summer split, if I remember correctly. But Taeyun, after subbing in, had some good performances, so maybe that would actually turn into an upgrade if he's a more aggressive player, something along those lines. Kingen was on the roster last year. Pichael'S was on the roster last year. And also when DRX was basically a super team with Chovy and Deft the year before. They had a very, very, very good team, DRX. And it was pretty insane that DRX let all those players just leave. I think they had Keria at that point too. Yeah, so it was Doran, Pichael'S, Chovy, Deft, Keria. Like, what an insane roster. In 2020 when they went to Worlds and they lost at Worlds, when I was thinking about their future potential, I really did think that they would go into 2021 as one of the favorites to win the World Championship, and I would have bet on them to do that. But the entire roster just fell apart, so it's pretty wild that something like that can happen. But now we have Zika. I don't think that Zika is on the level of Chovy, but Zika is a very highly thought of player in Korea. He went from the LCK to the LPL when Koma was the coach of Vici Gaming. Koma is a good talent evaluator, and if Koma thinks that Zika is good enough to be on his professional League of Legends team, then I want to support Zika. And he had some good performances in the LPL, especially in 2020. In 2021, he was on BLG, and BLG's coaching staff was horrible. There would be a lot of drafts where Zika was just put on champions that doesn't allow him to potentially carry a game, and that's how Koma was using him more often when they were on Vici Gaming. So hopefully the coaching staff for DRX doesn't waste this talented player. And then last but not least, we'll talk about Beryl. Did we talk about Pichael'S? Not last but not least. We'll talk about Beryl, but then I want to go back to Pichael'S. So for Beryl, I think that Beryl was the better player out of the Damwon bot lane. I think that Ghost had a lot of limitations as an AD carry. I'm not saying that Ghost is a bad AD carry. I probably should have put the disclaimer part of this video in there, but I'm not going to. It just means that when I say stuff like that, it means that I think that they get too much credit when their team wins, and not enough of the blame when their team loses. I think that Ghost actually went through some like struggles last year, potentially mentally, because I know that the roster had a lot of turnover, and they were trying different combinations with bringing Malrong in. So I think that it's kind of unfortunate if Ghost was going through some bad stuff, but at the end of the day, this is professional League of Legends, and I'm just talking about him as a professional player. So I think that Barrel's champion pool should be really good. When Damwon was at their scariest, in my mind, they were taking advantage of Barrel's diverse champion pool, playing things with a Senna AD carry. Senna is not meant to carry the game. It's meant to be on a team that has other players who are meant to carry the game, including Barrels like Pantheon and stuff like that. So those are the types of champions I love watching. I like when supports have very wide champion pools and can pick a bunch of different types of champions, because that means you could always potentially save your counter pick for your support. And I like that kind of League of Legends. And then, just touching on Pichael'S before we move on to the last team, Pichael'S performed very well at Worlds in 2020. I know that they had Chovy, I know that they had Deft, but that in that season, it was another spot where the drafts often didn't play around Chovy, and there are one of two ways to look at it. You can either say, wow, that was very stupid of the coaching staff. If they just played more around Chovy and drafted more around Chovy, they would have had easier game scripts that they had to follow, and Chovy would have been stronger in the mid-late game, and he would have been able to carry more games. Or you can look at it as, if they're willing to put Chovy on some non-carry champions, that means that they have confidence in Pichael'S being able to carry some of these matches. And I'm pretty sure there was like a Nidalee performance at Worlds where he had like 13 or 14 kills and just went completely insane. And that's ultimately the type of player that I think Pichael'S is. That's his ceiling, is being potentially one of the best junglers in the world. We haven't seen it consistently from him, but I think if DRX is able to perform at a high level this year, Pichael'S will look like one of the best junglers in the world. And last but not least, we have the OG 2020 Pichael special rebranded. So in 2020, I was very high on Suning. Going into the summer split, I loved Suning because Huan Feng was just obviously an incredible player, and in the spring it was really difficult for AD carries to play League of Legends, and then in the summer it became a little bit more easy to play harder carry style champions. But then ultimately at Worlds, Suning found a niche where they would put Huan Feng onto champions like Jin, which is more of a utility AD carry, and they would just play around him as a hyper carry on a utility champion, and it just made it so much easier for their team to play the game because they would get advantages during the laning phase, and were able to snowball games really hard. It was a weird year, 2020, because we didn't really see as we I don't think we ever saw jungle influence to that level, because like the economy for junglers was just out of control. They would farm up everything. They would often get level advantages over solo laners, and they would definitely have level advantages over AD carries, and they would just pump out ridiculous amounts of damage, which really wasn't SFM style. So in that type of meta, Suning, through coaching and having diverse champion pools and a good shot caller in Sword Art and SFM, I think he did a lot of the shot calling as well. Suning was able to go against the grain and still perform at a very high level, and I think that with Sword Art back and with the Shy on the roster now instead of Bin, I think that they have the same World Finals upside. In the LPL, it's very difficult to continue to consistently make Worlds because there are a lot of good teams in the LPL, but I love the Shy. I think people know that and mention that in the comments sometimes. I love SFM. I don't think that SFM is an elite jungler, but I love his style, the champions that he plays, the item builds that he brings out. I was never very high on Angel. I thought that he was holding back Suning, but then at Worlds he had a couple of really good performances, and I do think that in a team that has 5 solid players and an identity, a player like Angel can compete with the elite mid laners. I don't think that makes him an elite mid laner, but he can compete with them. And ultimately, his job is to help put Huan Feng and Sword Art into good positions, or at least help them be in good positions, help keep the game close, maintain the spine of the map, which is the mid lane. Just make sure that he's like not losing tower early, not giving gigantic gold leads to the other team. And I think that it's a roster that doesn't justify, well, plus 1200 isn't like the longest odds, but basically all they need to do is make it to the playoffs. It's 8%. It's an 8% implied win rate. So if you think that they win better, if you think they win more often than 8%, then it's an okay bet. I don't think that it's worth betting on them right now. I think that you should watch the sportsbook and see if this line gets closer to 14, 15, 1600, because if they stumble out of the blocks or if they have a couple of bad performances against the upper echelon teams, their odds might get somewhat depressed. But in reality, we're looking at a team that was in the finals 2 years ago and potentially having an upgrade in the top lane. Now, I think Bin was a very good player, was an up-and-coming player in 2020. I think that he showed that he can compete on the international level. He didn't look great in RNG's first match, but I don't expect that to continue. But yeah, that's it. Those are my 4 teams. I love EG. I love Vitality. I love DRX. I love Weibo Gaming. And I love all of you. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you want more access to me, check out my Patreon. $10 a month gets you access to Discord. I post all of my picks for the 4 major regions. Every single night, I give my picks for the following day's games. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.